now are Kelly Morrison and Lori Cousineau and Patty Acom, and we welcome them to our forum. Hi, everybody.
Good morning.
Jen, can you bring up the PowerPoint?
Yep, coming now.
Okay. There we go.
Hang on. No.
Great.
Oh no. Hang on. Sorry.
Okay. We do this once every 2 years, so we aren't exactly in practice here. So
We never claim to be IT professionals here.
yeah.
Better?
That's much better. Thank you. So this is our, as I said, our candidate forum for 2022. And joining me on this call are members of our Legislative Action Coalition. You can see on the next screen here what we do. And I'm not going to read all of this, but there was a picture of our Legislative Action Coalition in the meeting with one of our state representatives a couple of years ago. There we go. And actually, yeah, 2 of our state representatives. And we lobby on behalf of the Hopkins School District and advocate for policies at the state and federal level. And we've got some kind of illustrious alumni. One of them is here in this picture. In the back is Christopher Latondras, who used to be on the Legislative Action Coalition and has since been elected to Hennepin County Board of Commissioners. So there've been a number of other people who have gone on to elected office following participation in the Legislative Action Coalition. The next slide will show you what our school district looks like. As you can see, it's kind of awkwardly shaped as a consequence of merging of many small school districts over the course of about, I don't know, 50, 60 years, maybe. The last one being the merger of Golden Valley School District with the Hopkins School District back in 1982. So it covers all or parts of 7 different municipalities. The border runs from the city of Minneapolis down to the city of Eden Prairie. So it's rather extensive. And it crosses a number of legislative districts, Senate districts. Currently, as a result of redistricting, we have 4 state senators and 6 representatives at the Capitol. And today's forum has 4 separate sessions, 1 for each Senate district. This is Senate District 45. And you may watch other sessions that have been scheduled. We just completed our District 43 session at 9:30. And you can view that on YouTube or on Facebook. Coming up, as you can see, we've got District 46 and District 49, all of which represent parts of the Hopkins School District. And all sessions will be available for later viewing on our YouTube channel and our Facebook page. Guidelines for the current session for constituent questions. We do not support or oppose any political party or candidate. The views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates and not of our LAC or the Hopkins Public Schools. The purpose of this forum is to offer an opportunity for voters to hear the candidates discuss important education issues. And we're just going to focus on education that will affect students and families in our school district and across Minnesota. Questions may be submitted in advance via email. We are monitoring that as the session goes on. Questions that are unclear, hostile, or of a personal nature will not be used. Questions that are similar may be combined and summarized by the moderator. Questions may be submitted via chat during the Facebook Live event, and the moderator will treat them as stated above. The only questions related to education will be entertained for the purposes of this forum. And guidelines for candidates are each candidate will have 2 minutes to introduce themselves and 1 minute for a concluding statement. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer each question presented by the moderator. A timekeeper will be present to will present a running timer to keep track of the 2-minute countdown. And we will have a notification by our timer, Rachel Hartland, to the candidates to let them know how much time they've got left. The moderator reserves the right to utilize the mute feature if a candidate exceeds the time allotment. And the candidates will be selected in a randomized order to answer the presented questions. And I will now turn it over to one of our participants on the Legislative Action Coalition, our student board rep, Oscar Wolf, who will do the introductions and ask the candidate questions. So Oscar, take it away.
Thank you. I'm Oscar Wolf. I'm a senior at Hopkins High School. I'm a student board representative, and I also serve on the LAC.
My name is Kira Shones. I'm also a senior at Hopkins. I'm a student representative on the LAC as well as a leader of multiple student activism groups.
So we have a randomizer here, and the order for the opening statements will be Cousineau, Morrison, Acomb.
Oh, so we jump right in, I take it? Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining today. I'm Lori Cousineau, and I live in Wayzata, and the district I would represent is Wayzata, Minnetonka, Deep Haven, Shorewood, and Woodland. And just for some background, I am a wife, a mom of 2 girls that are in college and out of college. I'm a lawyer, I'm a former city council member, and I'm a current research consultant at the House of Representatives. So my day job is reading bills, it's summarizing them and analyzing the impact of a vote or a vote for or against a particular bill. So I'm running because my values are important, and I think they're also reflective of this new redistricted district. I'm running because I care about public safety. I'm endorsed by the MPPOA, which is the Minnesota Peace and Police Officers Association. I'm running because I care about our fiscal environment. Minnesota is a very high tax state, and I'd really like to take a look at some of our taxing policies and our spending. We have, some rampant waste, fraud, and abuse in our state budget. So I'd really like to take a look at that, especially since I've been serving on the State Government Finance Committee. And last, I would like to address education. We have got to do a better job by our students. We need to make sure that our students have the skills and the tools they need to be successful in the future. And we have some really troubling statistics to deal with. So again, I'm looking forward to connecting with all of you today.
Okay, I guess I'll jump in then. Thanks to the Legislative Action Coalition for hosting this forum and for all you do to support the Hopkins schools. I'm State Representative Kelly Morrison. I'm finishing my 2nd term in the Minnesota House. And after our once every 10-year redistricting process, I'm running to represent the new Senate District 45 in the Minnesota Senate. Besides being a legislator, I'm also an obstetrician gynecologist, and I've been practicing here in Minnesota for more than 20 years. I love Minnesota, and I have deep roots here. I'm actually a 6th generation Minnesotan, but I've lived in other places. As a kid, I lived in New Jersey and Mexico City, and my education and training took me to New Haven and Boston and Cleveland and Chicago. So I have the perspective to appreciate what an incredible place our state is, and also how much better it could be. I ran for office for the first time in 2018 because I wanted to be a constructive problem solver who works to heal our divides and a voice for science and evidence-based policy in the legislature. I worked hard to reach across the aisle to get productive legislation done in the context of our divided legislature, and I've had some success. 28 of my chief authored bills have become law, and almost all of them have been bipartisan. I've passed legislation to decrease the cost of prescription drugs, expand access to mental health care, expand healthcare for new moms, protect our lakes from aquatic invasive species, protect pollinators, and local infrastructure projects like expanding the Minnetonka Community Education Center building and water and bridge projects. I've written legislation with input from constituents, local city councils and mayors, local police and fire chiefs, and of course, students, teachers, and superintendents. I respond to thousands of constituent calls and emails every year, and I've held 25 public town halls. My campaign doesn't accept donations from PACs or lobbyists, so I'm not beholden to any special interests. I'm proud to have passed legislation to limit screen time for our youngest learners in pre-K and kindergarten, and to have written legislation to offer voluntary universal mental health screening in our schools and to expand access to mental health professionals there. I work hard to represent our communities in the House, and I'm thrilled that Hopkins is part of the new set of
Pardon
districts
me,
that I hope
that
to
is 2
represent.
minutes.
Thanks for the opportunity.
I guess it's my turn. Good morning, everybody. I'm Representative Patty Acom, and so happy to be here. And I really appreciate the Hopkins Legislative Action Coalition for giving us the opportunity. And I will just start by saying my involvement with the Hopkins School District spans over 50 years. I'm not quite sure how that happened since I'm really not that old, but somehow I guess I am. But so I attended and graduated from Hopkins schools, and we came back to this district when my kids were starting school because of the wonderful public school setting that this is and the wonderful communities that this school district has built. My kids have benefited from early childhood programs within the Hopkins School District, as well as the K-12 program. Within some of the early childhood programs, my kids benefited from early diagnosis of some challenging problems they had, whether it was delayed speech or even just a kindergarten screening and caught a vision issue for my son. And because of the early intervention, both issues were resolved. And so I have just the utmost respect for the school district and the incredible work that you all do. I have appreciated being able to partner with you at the state level. I'm in my second term running for my third. Before that, I served on the Minnetonka City Council. When I was actually in high school at Hopkins High School, I took a community involvement class, which really changed the trajectory of my life and really solidified how important it is to give back to our communities. So I'm excited to be here to be having the conversation with you all this morning to talk about the really important topic of education. As I've been out knocking on doors, it's one of the top issues that I hear about from residents the most. So grateful to be here, grateful for the opportunity to participate. And I really love that not only do we have members of the community, but we also have school board members and students. So what a great conversation we're gonna have. Thank you so much.
Oscar, I'll just interrupt here to tell you that we've received an email from Kathleen Falk that she will not be able to attend today's session. So she will not be a participant today.
All right. So our first question is, in recent years, numerous proposals have been made in the legislature to provide public funding for private and religious schools, either directly through vouchers or indirectly through tax credits, tax sheltered accounts, or by routing tuition through tax-exempt organizations. What is your position on providing public funding for non-public schools? Please explain your reasoning. And the randomizer has said that the order will be Morrison, Acom, Cousino.
Okay, thanks for the question. It's an important one. I think the funding education is one of the Minnesota legislature's most important and kind of sacred duties. And it's our Constitution calls for a system of public education that is funded by the legislature. I don't think that we should direct public money away from public education. The majority of our kids in Minnesota are educated in our public schools, and we should be focused on making them world class. I really think the pandemic showed us how our public schools hold our communities together. And I think we're at this inflection point where we can really reimagine and embolden public education in Minnesota. So I think it's our moment to reinvigorate it. Public money should be for public education. Thank you.
And I think I was next on the list, so I'll go ahead. And I thank you for the question. I think this is really important. And I think that there's a demonstrated contrast in opinions about this. I will say that I am 100% for public dollars going to support public schools, hard stop. We have an amazing choice of schools within our communities, and I think that's great. That's part of what makes our communities strong. Not every student thrives in every situation, and so we have wonderful public schools, we have wonderful charter schools, we have wonderful private and parochial schools. So we have great choices, but as far as funding, public dollars go to public schools, in my opinion. Thank you.
There we go. Hi. Okay, thank you for the question. I have a different tack. Minnesota already provides about $100 million per year to empower the parents who choose a non-public education. That includes funding for non-public pupil aid, school meal aid, post-secondary enrollment for high school students, which is the PSEO, tribal contract schools, education tax credits and deductions, and early learning scholarships. So with choice being the buzzword today, for many other reasons, I find it interesting that others don't want to allow parents the choice to get to their kids to the school that they would maybe be better served in. So I find it very interesting because we actually really fund non-public education already. So why can we not allow the parents to choose, whether through a voucher or an education scholarship fund, like other states have done? Why would we not allow freedom of choice for the students and their family, for the school that makes the most sense for their child, for the learning environment that would be the most optimal for that child? I think the legislature should be looking at what makes the most sense to get these kids educated to the level they need to bring their test scores to a place, or the proficiency to a place that makes sense for them, that sets them up for a future of success. So I would be very open to not only continuing the funding that we're doing for non-public schools, but maybe expanding it in ways that parents are willing and excited to learn about. And additionally, in most states, in most situations, only about 2% of the parents choose to opt out of the public school and use the vouchers or ESAs for another school. So it isn't really going to be that much of a change for our public schools. And it's really interesting that choice is so important to some people for some things.
And that is 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is, if elected, your oath to uphold the Minnesota State Constitution includes the education clause as mentioned in Article 13, Section 1, which reads in part, the legislature shall make such provisions by taxation or otherwise as will secure a thorough and efficient system of public schools throughout the state. Given the fact that the state currently has a record high surplus, and given the fact that education spending is $925 per pupil behind where it was in 2003 as adjusted for inflation, describe your education spending priorities and/or your plan to secure sound funding for Minnesota public schools. The order for this question will be Acomb, Cousineau, and Morrison.
Well, thank you for this important funding question. I think that we are, as we sit in Minnesota, at this point in time, and with the fact that we have this amazing surplus that would benefit so many people across our state in so many ways, it's unfortunate that we couldn't, some people walked away from the negotiating table as we were trying to come up with a way that had been agreed upon to spend the surplus. So what I will say is that we have, in my time in the legislature, the DFL House has passed incredible funding increases for education. In fact, historic funding increases for education. Now that was countered by the Republican GOP, the Senate GOP, that wanted to dramatically decrease those funding increases. And so if we're looking at ways to fund, I think we need to look at the surplus and be creative about how we can take a portion of that to invest in education. We need to be careful because this is much of the surplus is one-time funding. And so to put in long-term funding appropriations for that money will come back to bite us later. And I certainly don't want to have to raise taxes to be able, when we have a tax surplus today. So I would like us to be able to be creative about looking at how we can best provide the supports to the schools that they need. And as far as funding, I do think that the example that was given about the inflationary difference between today and 2003 is dramatic. And so I am 100% supportive of having our education funding be tied to the inflation, to inflationary spending. So I certainly am supportive of funding our schools. I want to make sure we're reducing the unfunded parts to special education and English language learners. So we've got a lot to do to help support our school districts and our students
Thank
so
you.
that
That's
they
2
can be,
minutes.
so they can be successful.
Okay, thank you for the question. I appreciate this. So what I intend to do, and it is my passion, to ensure that our kids are well educated and, like I keep saying, set up for future success. We need to get to the bottom of why these test scores, why this proficiency, this literacy rate has been sliding, COVID notwithstanding. Why are we not doing better by our students? So my intention, and it is my passion, is to get the money into the classrooms, pay the teachers a reasonable, in fact, a very good salary, so that we can attract, retain, and keep these teachers, solidly working for our schools. They are doing such a great job. We need to make sure we're taking good care of them financially. They should not be buying supplies out of their own pocket. So if I were to give more money to education, it would definitely be more in the increasing the current basic aid per pupil. That way we keep that money going to the student, going into the classroom. Let's work on education programs that aren't work. Let's find education programs and curriculum that would actually work. And if we're going to really talk about per pupil spending, already Hopkins School District has a rate of $14,000 per pupil, and the state average is $13,000. So these kids are funded. Can we do more? Yes, but where are we going to direct it? We've got to direct it to these classrooms, to academics, to making sure that they're reading to learn, learning to read. By the 3rd grade, these kids should be reading better than they are, at a higher literacy rate than they actually are. So we can throw a lot of money at education, but I would only put money and additional money into classrooms, into teacher salaries, ensuring the programs and the curriculum are there to support these kids and their academics. We can spend a lot of money, and as we see, $14,000 per pupil and test scores slipping, money doesn't equate to success. We've got to do better with
Thank
the
you.
money.
That's 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for this important question, and several important points have already been made. I go back to the funding our public education system is one of the primary jobs of the Minnesota legislature. And we have to recognize where we are right now as we are emerging from the pandemic. Every child in our state has suffered in some way from the pandemic, some much more so than others. So we have to pause, look at how we're going to help our kids catch back up. We need to give them and ourselves some grace and space to recover from this historic tragedy that we've just endured. And we need to, we've been digging out of the Pawlenty cuts to public education for a long time now. And I think the point about tying it to inflation, tying the general fund formula to inflation is very important. I guess I don't see investing in our children as throwing money away. I think it's probably the most important thing that we can do going forward. And when we think about the racial disparities that we have really, as one of my colleagues has said, admired for years, we talk about it all the time and we're not making adequate inroads into it. We need to reimagine and reinvigorate public education right now. It's incredibly important. I think it's the most important, one of the most important jobs of the Minnesota legislature. So we cannot defund public education. Thank you.
Thank you all. Our next question. The research is clear. Children who are fed while at school do better academically and socially. Despite knowing this, we still require families to pay for the food students consume while at school. Bills have been proposed at the federal level, and 4 other states have passed laws fully funding school nutrition departments. How would you address this issue and the funding crisis looming for school districts across the state? The order for this question will be Morrison, Cousineau, Acomb.
Thank you. This is such an important question. And when I look at policy, I try to look at it through a public health lens as a physician. And when we think about the social determinants of health, nutrition is one of the most important ones. We know kids can't learn if they're hungry or if they have poor nutrition. This is a really important way to give all kids the opportunity to have nutritious meals so that they can learn. There were 2 bills in the legislature last year that were included in the House Education Omnibus Bill that would have called for this. And I was a co-author on both of those bills. I think it's incredibly important and I'm for it.
Me, sorry, I forgot it was me. You know, under Minnesota law already, we do provide meals to children in households up to 150% of the federal poverty level. And then the families that qualify for a reduced meal receive a free meal because of our reimbursement rates from the state general fund, which we use to subsidize the school meals. I think that what we could do is expand the fund to help those families on the bubble of low income status. And we should look at increasing our state meal aid reimbursement to expand access to more families. But I think when you're asking for just a broad brush of paying for everyone's meals, I think you're dismissing the fact that there are families who don't need it and don't want it. There are many families who would prefer to use the food in their home, send the meal, make sure their kids get something healthy to eat. And I know that there's this tantalizing, a la carte at every school that is a challenge. I understand that. However, I don't know that Minnesotans honestly have the stomach to expand a program for those who don't need and don't want a free lunch. And with all that's going on with the Department of Education right now, to give them a blank check to fund all the meals in the school, again, for those who don't need and don't want, I don't think Minnesotans have the stomach for expanded money. Right now, I'd have to see much more oversight from an agency when it comes to a large amount of tax dollars. We need to see some responsibility, accountability, and literally some budgeting going on in the Minnesota Department of Education before we just have them feed every student who doesn't need nor want. But we could expand for those who are on the bubble or even other families that may want it but don't qualify. We can expand it for some. I'm very open to that, and I hope we get a chance to discuss that in the next legislative session.
Thank you. I apologize. My dog's going to start to bark now. Right on cue. As I consider this question and I think about Hopkins, and Hopkins School District has been such a trailblazer when it comes to nutritious meals for kids. I remember not long ago when Hopkins actually started cooking again instead of producing or thawing and sending kind of more of a TV dinner style. So Hopkins has been very focused on ensuring nutritious meals for students. And I will say, as a former recipient of free and reduced lunch, I know it can be seen as shaming for students that are on a free reduced program. And when we've heard many stories from students all across the metro and in Minnesota and across the country, frankly, who might owe money and they instead get given a peanut butter sandwich. That's not what we need to be doing for our students. We need to build them up and ensure that they are getting nutritious lunch. So I would absolutely support expanding that program to include all of our students. I think that when we look at what we need to be doing to ensure students can be best equipped to learn, feeding them is basic and one of the easiest things that we can be doing. So I'm certainly supportive of expanding that to all students within our districts. So thank you.
Thank you. Our next question comes from staff. What is your position on the proposed legislation to raise wages of non-licensed school staff to $25 an hour? What would you do to get this legislation passed, or what other alternatives would you offer to ensure our school support staff are provided a living wage and other benefits? The order for this one is Morrison, Acomb, Cousino.
Thank you for the question. I think I timed my coughing fit. Okay. This was a big topic of conversation last year, and I think it's a really important one, particularly when we look at our workforce shortages. These are people in our schools who are doing such important work for our students, for our teachers, for staff and faculty. We need to support them, and we need to lift them up, and we need to retain them too. And to do that, we need to pay them an adequate wage. So I am for the $25 wage for in this case. Thank you. I'm gonna wrap up.
I think I was next. I lost track though. Am I? Yes. Thumbs up. Yeah. Okay. Great. So, I think that it's been shown how important it is for the staff to student ratio, that makes such a difference in student outcomes. And so if we can have additional non-licensed staff within our buildings and classrooms that will help benefit our students, I think that's wonderful. I remember when my kids were in elementary school at Eisenhower, and each classroom had an LRT that was there to help, and it makes an incredible difference for the teacher as well as the classroom and the students. And so I am a firm believer in bringing in more non-licensed staff to help assist in the important learning that goes on in our schools. I think that right now, as Representative Morrison pointed out, we're in a record low unemployment, and that means we need to be paying more to get and retain good quality people that we need and want within our classrooms. And so I highly agree that we need to raise the wage, and we also need to be giving them benefits like unemployment. There's so many times when we have staff that come and they don't qualify for unemployment, and so they are always looking for that next opportunity because they want some reliability and some security. And so we need to be doing more to give them that within our schools. Thank you.
It's a great question. Thank you. I'm not opposed to raising the wages of some of these non-licensed teachers and these non-licensed staffers, if you will. However, I think every school district has to analyze their budget, and I don't think we should put a maximum or a minimum or an hourly wage as a sort of put that into legislation. I don't think that every district can accommodate such a wage, but they can accommodate maybe a raise or, something that's market driven, if you will. I think that to lock a school district into a particular wage can be somewhat harmful for some of our rural districts, our rural communities. I don't know that we can do that. However, every district should look, and I would support raising a wage for the non-licensed staffers in order to get the student teacher ratio met and make some difference. If it could make a difference in our reading, writing, math proficiencies, I'm all about supporting those non-licensed helpers. They are tremendously important in every classroom. However, to mandate that from the state is very challenging. Like I said, there are districts that cannot support that could not necessarily support that kind of a locked in number. But should we address that? Absolutely. Should every district and have the local control to make that decision for their school district, for their community? Yes. And I just think it's just got to be district by district. It should not come from the state.
Thank you all. Schools have changed how they deliver education, but not how they assess students. What are your thoughts on changing how they measure student success? and the order will be Acomb, Cousino, Morrison.
Thank you. I think that this is a really important question, and every student is unique. And so it's both in their learning, but also in how they can demonstrate their knowledge. And when we look at all of the tests that we have, whether they're the MCAs or the MAP tests, different students do well in different circumstances. And as we're seeing so many colleges start to get away from ACTs and SATs because they recognize it doesn't necessarily show what students know and how they can perform. So I think that I don't know that I have a firm solution in how that should be assessed, but I think that we need to look at the way we're doing it and what students are maybe left out. I think that as we look at the many different learning types that we have, there are all sorts of students that have maybe learning disabilities. And so I appreciate the fact that in many cases we can make accommodations to help them better be able to demonstrate their knowledge and understand the questions that are being made of them. So I think that we need to look to the experts within this field, and I'm certain that there are many both within our state and nationally, but I would like to see what they are coming back with as far as recommendations about what alternatives might be to assessing students' knowledge and where they're at. Thank you.
Oh, this is a good question. Thank you. And I had two daughters with some hearing issues in school. So I do appreciate a question like this. I'm very open to discussing alternative assessment or, testing and, providing different alternative assessments. I'll leave it at that. However, we can't undo one without having a firm, consistent assessment for all the students. I mean, if we want to replace it, that's fine, but we still need to find a way to have a baseline so we know how to measure a student's success. If we just eradicate it district by district, we have no way of really knowing where students are in terms of their peers in another district or their peers in another city. So while we can address different types of assessments, different types of even grading, whatever the issue you may be trying to get at, we need to make sure there's a baseline that's reflective of all students, that is available for all the students, so we have some measurement. We just can't eradicate that by every district. We have to have some kind of measurement that would show where we started and where we need to be. If you want to adjust those, I think that's something we can explore, and I think we do need to maybe address that based on every student's different learning challenge. There are so many different ways to learn, but we do have to have some baseline. I'm not willing to eradicate a norm without making sure everybody's going to be represented in a consistent manner. Thank you.
I think Representative Acomb made a good point bringing up the move away from ACT, SAT in college admissions. Those have been shown to measure, the only predictor is how students do in their first year of college from those tests. And people have recognized that they are not equitable tests, and they don't really prove much beyond how students do in the first year of college. I think we've probably relied too heavily on testing in schools, and we've kind of forced teachers into this position of needing to to teach to the test. I think we need to trust the experts and the professionals. I trust teachers. I agree with Representative Acomb. I think we need to talk to them because we do need accountability, and we do need to have some way to measure progress. But also, to her point, every student is unique. So to try to fit every child into the same narrow definition of what success looks like and what progress looks like is very difficult. So I think I guess my final thought on this is, let's listen to the teachers and to the professionals. I think we can do better than what we're doing now.
Thank you. Our next question is, in the coming years, school districts will be forced to spend almost $7 $700 million of funds meant for regular classroom instruction on mandated special education programs. Will you support significantly increasing special education funding to reduce the cross subsidy? The order for this one is Cousino, Morrison, Acom.
Oh, thanks for the question. As I said, I had a daughter in who had an IEP all the way through her K through 12 education. So I would be very open to discussing that. I would need to see a bill that lays out what we take away from our traditional educational funding and classroom spending. I never commit to anything unless I can see the bill. And as I said, I read the bills for a living. So I need to see exactly what the figures would be, what the bill would encompass before I would commit to signing anything. But I would be interested in adjusting these cross subsidies for sure. We've got an incredibly large special ed need in Minnesota today. I'm a parent of one. I know how important it is and how much support I received. I just feel like before I commit, I need to see what the full complement of the bill would be and what funding would it really take? And is there a way we could do it without spending quite so much? Or is there another alternative? But we definitely need to take a very hard look at it. And I think it's the legislators' job to look at this next year. As far as the cross subsidies go, we need to look at how we can supplement all of that. Yeah, I'd be very open to looking into that. Thank you.
I think I'm next. This is a hugely important issue because it strains all of our school budgets. We have the federal mandate, which is appropriate that all kids are entitled to the education that they need. But they've underfunded their mandate and so have left it to the states to pick up the slack. We did pick up the slack temporarily in the legislature in the previous session, but we need to look at longer term fixes so that our kids who are in our special education and English language learner programs get the education and the instruction that they need, as do all of the general education students. This is really important and urgent. As I've said a couple of times now, we're at this inflection point with public education in Minnesota post-pandemic, and we have got to seize this moment and optimize it in every possible way.
Thank you. As was said, this is an incredibly important topic. And, I did vote to support additional funding to special education. And I will say there was not one Republican in the House that voted to support that additional funding. And so, as was stated, this was a federal mandate, and so the federal government isn't standing up to their end of the bargain, and we are not in the state either. And so we need to do better to ensure that every student does have the education and the tools they need in order to be successful. So I am certainly in favor of trying to close that cross-subsidy gap, and it does mean incredible strains to our school districts by where they need to take that money from. And so I'm hugely supportive of making sure our districts have what they need in order to make all of their students successful.
Thank you. Do you support allowing locally elected school boards to establish the school calendar and classroom time requirements that best meet the needs of their students and families? The order for this one will be Acom, Cousino, Morrison.
Can I ask you to repeat that question? I'm really sorry. I didn't get it all.
Do you support allowing locally elected school boards to establish the school calendar and classroom time requirements that best meet the needs of their students and families?
Thank you. I appreciate the question. And prior to going to the state legislature, I served on the Minnetonka City Council for 7 years. And so I completely understand and appreciate local control. And I think that as we know, different things can come up that can impact a school district's ability to be able to start when they want to start, whether it's construction, whether it's what days off, whether it's snow days. And so to give local school boards the local control to be able to adjust their calendars and their classroom time to accommodate whatever barriers might be in their way coming up this next year or in the coming years, I think that that's absolutely appropriate. I'm a strong proponent for local control.
Oh, thanks for the question. I too am a proponent of local control. However, I'm confused as to why the district wouldn't be empowered to make that decision instead of the board. So the board makes other decisions. I thought the district would be the ones in charge of the calendar and the scheduling and all of that. I'd have to learn more about where the conflict is and why the change now. I would need to know, and I'm asking rhetorically, why is the school board wanting that issue when in fact it's what the district is supposed to be in charge of, because they are running the school district. They are in charge of organizing the district and scheduling and academic calendars and whatnot. It seems odd to me that we would relinquish it to the school board because that's part of the responsibility of the district. But I guess I'd have to learn more about why that is such a conundrum for a board and a district. Do they work in tandem? Can they work in partnership, or do they not? I would need to know more about why this is an issue.
I'm also for local control. I think it's appropriate that school boards be able to make the calendar to fit the district. I would take this moment, though, to also say that I think I want to make sure that we have robust summer programming and robust summer options, because we see that kids lose some of their progress over the summer. And that's an equity issue as well, where, families that can afford to supplement summer activities have a very different experience than those that cannot. So I'm sort of intrigued, we'll throw out a controversial idea, about year-round school that happens in other countries. So some version of that I think is interesting, and whether we need something to make sure that our kids have care and educational opportunities during the summer. But to the crux of the question, yes, I'm for local control.
Thank you. Our next question was submitted through the Facebook live stream. Today's career landscape is evolving rapidly. What can Minnesota's legislature do to prepare high school students for life after graduation? The order for this question is Morrison, Acomb, Cousino.
It's a great question. And I think that particularly in this moment of workforce shortages, we have an aging population. We need to make sure that every one of our young people is engaged to the best of their ability in our workforce in appropriate ways. And that's going to look different for different young people. So obviously, for everyone who wants to pursue a four-year college opportunity, that should be an option. Bolstering our trade and vocational schools, our community colleges. There are lots of different opportunities, and I like this increasing movement toward bringing some of that into the high school experience so that kids can be exposed to different professions and jobs during high school, can gain some skills and experience, and then be ready to launch. So it's a very thoughtful and important question that we need to be thinking about going forward.
Thank you. I also, think this is a really important question. And I think that, we do some great things within our schools already to help kids move on to that next, whatever is next for them. And we have options like PSEO, we have college in the classrooms, and guidance and help and mentorship in order to navigate that transition into what's next. I think one thing that we can do more about, and Representative Morrison touched on it, and that's VOTEC and trades. I think that we are seeing a lot of shortage, and frankly, a four-year college isn't for everyone. And so whether it's two-year colleges or VOTECs, I think they're really important things that we need to do better. I'm a member of the Minnetonka Rotary, and we give scholarships each year. And we've started doing scholarships to trade schools and VOTECs also, because it's always been, traditionally, it's just been for those students who are going on to four-year colleges. So I think it's really important that we recognize how important it is that we're giving options for everybody. And so the whole idea of VOTEC and trades, it used to be when I was in high school that we took shop and we took, woodworking, and we did a lot more things that maybe my kids didn't do now. And so I think trying to find ways to reintroduce those opportunities into schools to show kids what they can be doing. And one thing I will plug really quick is the whole importance of the green transition to our green economy. And so also showing kids that there are careers in renewable development, renewable energy development. And so there's a lot of exciting things, and I think we can do better to provide all those opportunities to our kids.
Well, I have to echo the answers, but this is a really important question. I'm really passionate about partnering with the Office of Higher Education. And what we can do is bring those options to the high schools. We need to bring VOTEC tech options into the high schools. And as it has been said, I do recall the vocational classes that were in high school when I was a kid, and it really made a difference for so many of the students at the time. And we need to make sure we are fostering interest in other things besides a four-year degree. So we've got to be partnering with the Office of Higher Education. I think the Minnesota Department of Education, the Office of Higher Ed, they need to work together to bring some of those classes, those courses, those options back to the high school. And we already do have the PSEO, we have the guidance for college counseling, but we've got to expand it to those kids that want to work with their hands, that want to learn a trade, a different skill set that isn't offered in a four-year degree. We've also got to make sure that they're workforce ready, whether they want to do a work study program like there is in college. We used to do that in the high schools. We used to have kids that would work part-time during the school day because that was just going to be their trajectory. And we've got to make sure they're ready for a real job outside of high school, if that's the path they choose, and teaching them when they're young how to manage their time, how to show up at a job, how to be accountable. Those are all skills that we can start with right away in high school and even before, even in the middle school if we need to. So I am about partnering with the Office of Higher Education. I think that's our best method of getting curriculum that makes sense in the schools that would lead these kids down the path that they are choosing, or a path that they are going to be successful.
I want to thank the candidates for their responses to these questions that came in, and I want to thank Oscar and Kira for hosting the question period. We've gotten to the point where we're going to wrap up with closing statements, 1 minute closing statements from each of the candidates. And I don't have a randomizer, so I'm just going to randomize it in my head. We'll start with Senate candidate Kelly Morrison.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you today to talk about education and providing the Hopkins School community the opportunity to learn about the candidates for our state legislature. It's really been my honor to represent District 33B in the House, and I've tried really hard to represent our communities with integrity and hard work. There's a lot at stake in this year's elections, and funding for public education and ensuring that all our children have the opportunity to live up to their potential are critical to the future of Minnesota. I love our state, and I want it to be the best place to live, work, and raise a family. I'm working hard to earn the support of the people of Senate District 45, and I hope to have the opportunity to collaborate with all of you going forward. Please reach out to me directly at kelly@morrisonforsenate.com if you have questions or ideas, or check out my website at morrisonforsenate.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you, candidate Morrison. And now we'll hear from the House candidates. we'll start with Cousineau.
All right. Well, I want to thank the Legislative Action Coalition today for just allowing us to express our views, kind of show who we are and delineate us from each other. It's a really important topic. Education is really top of mind for all of us. If we've had kids, going to have kids, or have raised kids, this really matters to most of us, because really these kids are the future of Minnesota. So we've got to make sure that they're prepared and they're ready to go when they leave the school, and they have a dream that they can actualize. And we've got to teach them how to dream and give them the opportunities to do the things they want to do and make their dreams come true. But all of that starts with a good, solid, quality education. And I'm committed to teaching these kids, getting these kids prepared with reading, writing, math, science, history, civics. We've got to get back to some basic educational principles. We've all seen the value of a good education, and we know that these kids are worthy of the education that we have received in the past. So we've got
Thank
to bring
you.
them
That's
back.
1 minute.
Thank you.
And finally, House Candidate Acom.
Well, thank you all so much. I really can't thank you enough, honestly. The Hopkins Legislative Action Coalition has really an amazing reputation for doing advocacy. And I have really appreciated the opportunity to partner with you all in my time at the legislature. I loved it when we had in-person meetings down at the Capitol, and I've appreciated the meetings that we've done over Zoom during the pandemic. And so I hope that you will continue to look to the open door that I have, and that we can continue a partnership that will be to ensure all of our students are successful, because we know when our students are successful, so are our communities, and our schools are kind of the foundation of our communities. And so I thank you for all the work that you do in the classrooms and to help support our students, and appreciate the opportunity to be here today. And you can find out more about my campaign at pattyacom.com. Hope to earn your support. Thanks so much.
The Hopkins Legislative Action Coalition would like to thank all of you today for your time and for your interest in education issues. The LAC members, along with your constituents, enjoy learning more about your priorities for education funding and policies that will affect the future of Minnesota students. We appreciate your candidacy and wish you the best of luck in the November 8th elections. So thank you all for attending, and thanks for our viewers for watching. This concludes our candidate forum.
Have a great day.